Thank you. Um, so I'm Heather. If any of you don't know me, I work as the Peacebuilding Coordinator here. And as we've been planning this conference, sorry, out of my loud window. As we've been preparing this conference over the last weeks, I've had this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in my office. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And I think today, as we have heard so many different speakers looking at justice from many different angles, I have seen this passion and compassion and love that they have brought. I am very happy to be able to introduce Jackie Block, our MCC Saskatchewan Board Chair. I've known Jackie for many years now, and I'm very happy to know her. Jackie has a strong history with MCC. She and her family served with MCC in Mexico years ago. She works part-time with the Canadian Food Grains Bank currently, and also is a volunteer within her community and her church. And I am very much looking forward to what Jackie is going to guide us through as we close today.
Okay, well, thank you so much to everyone that joined today, for the MCC staff that have done so much work and the guests they invited along, and for everyone else that came to participate in this common learning opportunity. I have a few thoughts that I would like to share, and then also some questions for you to help you reflect on what you've heard today. So I'll start. MCC envisions communities worldwide in right relationship with God, one another, and creation. It's a beautiful vision. And yet every day we encounter situations in which people are not in right relationship with God, one another, and creation. And so we have the work of, biblically speaking, and I think we confirmed today, is foremost in a relational term. Injustices occur when people do wrong to someone or something, perhaps including themselves, and result in harm. And restorative justice recognizes that when a harm is done, this has a negative impact on both the victims and the offenders, and that both parties need restoration in order to return to a place of peace or shalom. Much of what we had heard today is about accompanying people who are on a journey of restoration in order for them to live more justly in their lives. And we've heard a lot of good things. So thank you, everyone, for sharing. I want to offer a few words, and they're coming from some verses in the book of Galatians, in the first 10 verses of Galatians 6, but I'm not going to read them because they're loaded with some theological concepts I think are just distracting. But I wanted you to know where these thoughts are coming from in case you wanted to look them up yourselves. These verses tell us to not mock the justice of God, and they also conclude with an encouragement to not grow weary in doing good to everyone. But I have three kind of thoughts that I have, just summary before I offer some reflecting questions to you. Restorative justice, it seems important that we're willing to keep people accountable. And that's a hard word. So one of the questions I just offer is, what struggles or resistance do you have in trying to keep people accountable? Maybe it's hard to be an active bystander. But keeping, maybe it's with your own children. There are always situations where, how do we keep people accountable for things that they have done that are harmful to other people? I notice this a little bit when my kids play sports, and recently, and maybe it's just a figment of my imagination, but it's almost like I see people struggling to blow the whistle as a referee because they don't want the people to feel bad that they've had a foul. And yet that doesn't really work. There's something off with that. And so there's might be lots of different reasons. Sometimes in the church, I think we offer a lot of forgiveness, but we don't know how to actually keep people accountable. So just a question I just have in your own mind and in your own heart is, how do you feel about keeping people accountable? The verses that I referred to talk about keeping people accountable, but to do it with gentleness and humility. And that's something that I definitely heard up in the straight eight. Oh, I'm not saying it right in that conversation with Stan. So for primarily keeping people accountable out of a sense of punishment or vengeance, or even our own self-righteousness, we might really struggle to get other people back on a right path, which is the goal, I think, that we want to do. So a willingness to keep people accountable is one part I've been hearing. A willingness to carry the burden of another. Injustices put a burden on a community. When people have been harmed or are harming other people, it impacts the community. And often both the victims and the offenders need help. They need help from people that are perhaps more hopeful than they are in their current situation, and are willing to be present and work alongside people who are hurting or struggling or have experienced a harm done to them. Sometimes we might just want to avoid situations because we feel like it's not our issue, but that's not the love of Christ that God calls me to in Christ. Calls us to a love that's willing to carry the burden of another. I also feel like these verses and what I've heard today is a willingness to pay attention to our own work of living justly. None of us lives perfectly justly. And while we think about these large situations in which injustices are occurred, every day we run into things that are unjust, and we perhaps are the one as much the victims as the offender in those things. And I really think if maybe in our lives each day we're willing to be aware of those in our own lives and work through them, the hard work of restoring justice in those small areas, not only will it help the society around us perhaps be more hopeful and more a healing place, but it also will give us maybe some practical tools to work in larger situations of injustice. So those are some of the things I've talked about. I think all those things I've talked about include not only living justly, but loving mercy and also walking humbly. And I'm very fortunate, I feel like, in my own Christian framework, to feel like the God that I serve not only calls me to live this, but lived it himself in being a very active participant in my own restoration, in spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. So those are, I just want to honor God in his work in my own life in restoring me justly. So those are a few of my thoughts from the day, but I also wanted to share a screen here. I have some training as a spiritual director, and I'm going to use a bit of a tool that I used from a different context in the past to try to work with you guys. Can you see that? Everyone see that?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, so these are a few questions. These are some discerning questions just to help you process maybe some of the things that you're doing. The main question is the one at the top, and then there's three other ones. This isn't like an academic, intellectual. It's maybe there's one of the questions that just really helps you process kind of your own experience from today. So as you think about your day, the question is, what am I carrying today? What is on my heart as I come to this time? What concerns do I have for others? What heart longings, passions, and desires seem strong to me at this time? And we can be overwhelmed with maybe all the things we heard today, but I really encourage you to think, is there one thing that really is on your heart as you think about being involved in the work of restoring justice? What are you really carrying with you, or will carry with you as you end your day? The second part is, what am I grateful for today? What has moved me to joy, peace, gratitude, or forgiveness? What experience have nurtured me? And if appropriate, what relationships have embodied the gift of Christ's love? So as we think about the things that we're carrying that are maybe hard and difficult and on our heart, we can also think about the things that we're grateful for. And these can also be discerning questions as we think about our experiences in also wanting to participate in a justice that's restorative. So what are you grateful for today? What are you leaving here today that you feel grateful for? Finally, what am I drawn towards? Is there a new way of loving my neighbor that I heard today that seems invitational? What might God be wanting to say to me personally about justice and my understanding of it? And also important is, do I sense any resistance to that invitation? And just to work that through in a way that's helpful for you. If you're feeling resistant to something that you're actually drawn to, and create some conflict within you, to name that and to work that through. as you process, what are the things that you might be drawn towards as you think about the things you've heard, the invitations that have been offered, and your own particular experience and who you are. Hopefully those prayerful, reflective questions will take things that you've heard today that are in your mind and you're wrestling with, and take them deeper into your heart as you try to live from today and put some thoughts you have into actions in your life. So that's all I have to say, and I'll turn it over to Heather.
Thank you, Jackie. That's a great space and posture to leave our time together with. I want to provide 3 calls of action, and it will only take me a minute to do that. First, I encourage you all to keep learning. As you've heard, these are huge things and they are complex, and we will always be learning more. So November is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and MCC Manitoba has some webinars coming up in the coming weeks. There will be links in the chat right now. The National Restorative Justice Symposium is at the end of this month, and that is also available for anyone. Also, the chat is coming in the link. Tomorrow, the Prairie Rivers Reconciliation is starting their 3-day conference. So that is some local content of how to go deep in our understanding of justices. And as we mentioned before, MCC has trainings that are always available for different groups. You Got Booked and Training Active Bystanders. And tonight we have Training Active Bystanders that is available for our conference goers. So you are welcome to attend, and the Zoom link is there. So keep learning. The second one is to get involved. We can learn all this head stuff, but we do need to put our bodies where our minds are at. And so I would encourage you to find restorative justice organizations that are working in our communities, like Micah Mission, Parkland Restorative Justice, and COSA South Saskatchewan. And I would encourage you also to advocate for system changes that really uphold the dignity of all people. And finally, I want you to take to heart really what Jackie has just given us. And I think in this work, we all need to really take time to let this understanding sink inside of our bodies and to reflect on it. And we are very happy that we have 3 congregations within our province who are offering justice-oriented services in the coming weeks, and we encourage you to attend those services. So tomorrow, Osler Mennonite will be focusing on justice, and then the following week, Hepburn Mennonite Brethren and Wildwood Mennonite will also be having services on justice. And as you keep learning and being involved in justice work, I invite you to always remain curious, open, and willing to hear where God is leading you. I'm going to send you with a Margaret Wheatley writing. And this in itself is a call to action that has many different entry points. It's called Turning to One Another. There is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Asking what is possible, not what's wrong. Keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that many others share your dreams. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty. Invite everybody who cares to work on what is possible. Acknowledge that everyone is an expert about something. Know that creative solutions come from new connections. Remember, you don't fear people whose story you know. Real listening always brings people close together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change the world. Rely on human goodness. Stay together. And with that, I bless you and send you to enjoy the rest of your Saturday and coming days. Thank you for attending our MCC conference.